So, hello everyone and welcome this afternoon to this afternoon's event. My name is Esther Collins and I'm Head of Learning at Towner in Eastbourne. On screen with me is Becky Barry, who is a British Sign Language interpreter, and she will be visible throughout the event. Talking Loud is a series of events hosted jointly by Towner and Delaware Pavilion in Bexhill. The talks aim to give you the opportunity to hear from leaders across the creative industries. Talking Loud is part of Southeast Creatives, a development and support programme for small businesses in the creative, cultural and digital sectors across East Sussex, Kent and Essex. And this programme is funded by the European Regional Development Fund. I'd like to thank those behind Southeast Creatives, especially Sally Staples at East Sussex County Council and Philip Johnson and the team at Locate East Sussex for their support on the Talking Loud events. So a bit of housekeeping about today's event. The event will last between 45 minutes and an hour. Live captioning is running for the event, and you can turn this on or off using your personal controls in Zoom. Please excuse any errors in the transcription as it's an automated programme. So that you can focus on the discussion, we won't be including any live Q&A or chat today. So thank you to those of you who have sent your questions in advance. These have already been passed on to Gateau Chocolat and Scottee, and they will respond to them as part of their conversation. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction to our speakers. So Gateau Chocolat's work spans drag, cabaret, opera, musical theatre, children's theatre and live art. His bewitching baritone has been heard in previous works such as Gateau Chocolat, I Chocolat, In Drag and Black. His children's show Ducky premiered at the South Bank Centre in 2016 and was included in The Guardian's 6 of the best shows for children in the 2018 Edinburgh Film Fringe Festival. His recent production Icons has toured internationally and has also been presented with accompaniment from the Little Coco Orchestra. And this is a Gateau Chocolat initiative to support diverse musicians through the creation of an ensemble which is entirely formed of women of colour. Gateau Chocolat's work in theatre includes working at the National in Rufus Norris's production of Threepenny Opera and Festi in Emma Rice's final visionary production of Twelfth Night at the Globe. Gateau Chocolat is also a featured cast member of 2-time Olivier Award-winning cabaret and circus La Clique and La Soirée. His opera work includes working with contemporary composers at the Royal Opera House, Wigmore Hall and Glyndebourne. Most recently, he appeared in Wagner's Tannhauser, starring Stephen Gould, which opened the 108th Bayreuth Festival in 2019 and attracted headlines around the world for the reaction to his participation as a Black drag artist. And he will be in conversation with Scottee. So Scottee is a self-taught artist who makes political performance. He is the co-founder of Scottee and Friends Limited, a collective of artists, producers and participants working across the UK. Scottee is an associate artist at Home Manchester and is one of the founding members of the Working Class Artist Group. Scottee is also one of the token working class people allowed on BBC Radio 4, host of a weekly podcast, After the Tone, and you can find thirsty selfies of him on Instagram. So welcome to Gateau and Scottee. Hello. It's really nice to have you here today. I was just going to kick off your discussion and then disappear by asking if you could both give us a short introduction into what you do and how you got into this field of work.
Scottee, you go. Okay, fine. Through the back door, completely illegitimately, a complete mistake. Don't know why I'm here. Why is it still happening? When I was 14, I was expelled from school. My mum signed me up for some workshops in a arts space across the road from where I live, the Roundhouse. And there I just managed to happen upon some really great radical queer people. And so by the age of 18, I'd done the rounds. And now I'm this sort of mouthy, I can't say the word because it'd be rude, but I'm gobby. And then I sort of found the world of drag and performance and showing off in nightclubs. And that's how I met you, Chocolate Cake, which is the only name I ever referred to you as. Gateau, how did you get into it?
It's so interesting that our stories as regards how we entered the performance space is so similar, because I studied law. This is a mistake that keeps on evolving. I keep on going, what? Like, why am I here? Because I think there's a sort of vindication or verification that something they have because they've studied, or that gives you a different sort of cachet and currency if people know or think that you studied, where I haven't. I found that it's a platform that allows me to have some really tricky conversations. I don't know how to say them articulately sometimes, and sometimes I get it wrong, but I think that's part of who we are in terms of also showcasing and platforming our mistakes and making that part of the conversation. So yeah, very much like you, studied law at Sussex University, then worked for American Express, Lloyd's Debt Collection, fundraising, like, what? And then Empress Star in 2008 asked me to go to Australia with her, to Adelaide. And that's where everything sort of changed, from doing stuff that was like with Johnny Woo, a Gay Sweet Bingo, or Glastonbury. The 2008 was the massive shift, and it continues to shift. I'm like, okay, we're doing a town I'm just going to talk about some cake things,
But I think that's where my journey with you, I say journey because it has been one, hun, had started in 2008. Because I remember I was sort of like working in nightclubs, standing on bars.
We did Supper Club.
Yeah. And but have I got this wrong? Were you working at the NHS when we first?
So I was working at NHS Direct. That's correct.
You were telling people on the phone. So you're like that.
This sort of like, wait, what? How is none of this makes any sense? Like, what? So yes, but I think it's very organic, starting to embrace the fact that a choice might lead you to the most extraordinary of places, but that always feels like a lesson or enhancement. I think is you have agency in how you digest where you end up. You do know what I mean? I think you could look at it as being bad or difficult, which in some cases it is, and you can look at that as also turning into a sort of lesson. That lesson could be, I've done it now, and I will never do it again. And I think that is such an important part of what we do, is turning every sort of event into an experience, and then you can catalog it. Is it good or bad? And how do I avoid it? And, how do I improve my practice? For instance, Making Black, which was about a meditation on depression, but only finding out through touring the work, the sort of work that I had to do around performing the show. So yeah.
When I was listening to our very official bios being read out there, I was like, God, isn't it, because of course me and you have gossiped our way through many a backstage across the world, because, they like to keep the weirdos with each other where they can see them. But what I found really interesting is this sense of like where we've come from and what how we would like our change to be effective in both of those biographies, in terms of the work that we do, which sort of, I guess people would say, sits outside of our practice, but what we would say is like solely about what we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I found that really interesting. So I guess what I was going to ask is, like, do you think those life experiences, which I think you were sort of briefly touching on there, where we've got a Venn diagram of some of them, do you think those affect the way that you make work and the work that you want to make?
I think the short or succinct answer to that question is absolutely. And I find that that is the same with you. I think it is also about the function of how diversity works, as opposed to it being a buzzword for a building that we've got to be diverse. Like, I was commissioned by Anthony at Colchester Arts after a mistake of an evening. So basically I came out and I was about to do my number, and it was the one, I do the lip sync of Susan Boylan, So I Dreamed a Dream. But when I came out and stood on stage, between the first row and the stage, that bank that's normally empty was filled with like 30 kids. And it wasn't that I didn't have child-friendly material, but it was just a moment to pivot to. So I finished this song, took my heels off, came off stage, and I was like, so tell me, what do you do? Do some ballet, do some this. And then the next day, Anthony called me and commissioned, he said, I think you should do a kid show. So originally the kid show was going to be like a Disney sing-along princesses. And then my niece moved back to England. She was 3, the only Black girl in her class in Hove. And she started talking about how curious kids go, why is your nose shaped like that? Why is your hair this texture? And moving from Nigeria, where she was just a girl, to moving here, where she becomes a Black girl, because that's how she's racialized here, meant I rethought what I wanted to do with the work, and I made Ducky, which holds bullying and racism and homophobia, because I wanted her to see that this was also her space. And so I think, a bit like you, the pride of your working class roots and getting your foot in doors that might normally be closed to you, again, because I think there's that sort of association with higher arts institutions, is very important. So actually, I hand the ball back to you and ask, as you make work, is your identity central to your practice and the work that you make?
Yes, and I guess the answer, or the thing, I guess, which both of us can relate to, I think, from conversations that we've had, is when it's central or when it's centralized. So when you make a choice, or when the choice is made for you, because whenever we make work that some people expect, this work's going to be Black, this work's going to be common, this work's going to be fat, this work's going to be queer. So much so that I think probably you and I have been brought on stage so many times with either of those prefixes put in front of our name with the word artist, because of course we just can't be an artist, we're queer, fat, common artist. So it's about, I guess for me, there's a conversation about agency within, when we're allowed to own, when we are expected to be stealth, but also the rules of engagement, right? So some commissioners want the mouthy working class, aggressive work on stage, but when you're in the nice meeting with them, they want the polite version of you that doesn't swear and use the vernacular that you would normally use. And sometimes that expectation is quite subtle or subliminal, but it's always there, particularly when you're talking to somebody who you know cannot understand what you're talking about when you're talking about the things that you are. So to answer your question more directly, I think I've gone through many periods of that where I've been like, okay, exploit it, and then realized the damage that I was doing to myself, essentially picking scabs for
Or
white posh people
yeah.
to sit in audiences and go, I now know because I've come to see this work. And then that developed a conversation in my head with my latest work class, where I will only give it to them if they are willing to really endure the absolute horror. So there's a payoff of it. And so now I'm, instead of trying to preach to those that want to be preached to, I think my next incarnation of work around identity is very much about an physical exhalation of people who understand, and creating a space in which we can all go with each other.
Yeah, sorry, I was nodding. I was also just trying to find the questions, the pre-sent questions as well, just so that we can answer those at some point. But I suppose I was nodding as well because actually it's so interesting how the intersection of our practice and framing it in this way in a conversation helps you to articulate, for me, the reality that is actually quite triggering, because, and that's not melodrama or what some might consider snowflakism or whatever. I don't really care. But the truth is, whenever we go to buildings, actually, the easiest way to describe this is how people distill what they think I do, how they project the parameters that they've created that I always sit outside of, and they're like, and then somebody asked me a question about drag and the form of drag that I do, and I went, I think I've been a drag queen or a drag artist since I was 4, because for me, being a drag queen isn't about female impersonation. It's about a nuanced understanding that you have access to perform the parts of your identity that a situation requires. And it's something that I've been doing since I was 4. Like, if I'm in a group that find me effeminate, I know how to tweak the dial to be the clown. If I'm meeting my friend's parents, like, I was always teacher's pet and parents' pet, because once I realized part of my identity, like being queer and gay in Nigeria, I knew immediately, for my safety and for my health, that I had to adjust. So I was a bit of like a really chameleonic, like I was always able to, and I think this is a representation of that. This is a result of that. So how does that manifest in buildings? It's so interesting that you bring that up, because buildings invite you and then they go, we don't want that part. We don't want that part. This just here, this little slither.
They want good black, good fat, good common, good queer. They don't want ugly versions of those.
No, they don't want the reality. And it's a conversation I actually had to have on Facebook and Instagram, the first live that I did, because what was becoming apparent as the reach grew wider, and it was just not people like, again, so interesting that you've made a comment about wanting your work to be broader than the choir who want that story. As it grew, it became really interesting that some of the people who were joining just wanted the drag queen who talked about plants, or did toilet opera, or did like Little Nieces, and then we're very affronted and irked if I performed the identity outside what they were projecting. And I'm like, somebody said it's the Black agenda, and I was like, what's interesting about that is when you're Black, it's just your life. It's just, there's no agenda. Okay, for sure. So yeah, your answer there was lots of yeses and nods, and how we navigate those questions of what is asked of us. Could you just, so you want to create a space a space that allows who to exhale?
those affected by the stuff that I'm talking about. So I guess at the moment, I'm in the research process of making a circus show about risk. And so it correlates the relationship that the circus artist has with risk, in which they willingly put themselves in risky situations, between the risk the queer body is unwillingly put through. And I'm making this work not for the straights or the normal gays. I'm making this for those who will be able to hear this experience and be like, as a moment of decompression, but as a moment of collective education, because I think there are so many expectations of us to be robust and full and round and there and together, that society put upon queer people, and the expectation to be, you know, good, as we mentioned earlier, good in front of all those, but not political in front of all of those, that I just want to be in rooms now, instead of having Phoebes and Felicities go, I saw this show and now I get it. That I want to be around members of the family on the subject that I'm talking about, who can go, thank you for giving me language, thank you for giving me space for articulation, and then them taking it on to de-traumatize. Because I guess what I'm interested in is from, and I wonder if this is something that you can relate to as well, but from all of those intersectional identities that mean so much to us and that we've had to reclaim, there was always a trauma attached to them. Yeah. And I don't know if we will ever get to see a generation of de-traumatized. So what happens if we actively de-traumatize with each other together, rather than us stand on stage and be like, excuse me, can I have 10 minutes of your attention? Right. I think my brain is now going more way into collective separatism than it is, let me try and convince you otherwise, dear gammon folk.
Right. Okay. Wow. Yeah. That is so. The reason why that's so interesting, I suppose, is because the work has always sort of centered the reality that I'm trying to find a space. No, if I'm going to be brutally honest, at the heart of the work, or language, which has been sort of calcified through micro and macro aggressions, and at the heart of some of the work, I think is changing, but at the heart of some of the work at the start was a plea for understanding and acceptance, because I think we're always reminded, one, of the space that we hold or inhabit, but two, this is one that's really problematic, two, how members of the general public think that they have given us, that they've given permission for us to so like yesterday, talking about this town hall about conversion therapy, and it's going to be open to members of the public. The same thing happened in Ireland with abortion, same thing happened in Sydney with marriage equality. And regardless of how it ends up, the reality of how it operates on the ground is Joe Blogg crossing the street thinking that he has the permission to go, yes, you are allowed to walk on that sidewalk. And it's so dangerous. So I think early on, the interrogation or the litigation of our identity was going like, okay, please, okay, can I help you understand, so that you just know that I actually don't want to do anything that's going to affect your life. I just want to have this space. So removing the need to keep asking for permission is a point that you get to, because you go, you know,
and yeah, like, look, 12 years ago when we were children, essentially, like finding our feet, we thought going out onto those stages was doing it.
Yeah.
We are reclaiming that space, and to a certain extent we did, and we were, for ourselves. But the older I get, I don't know if this is cynicism or realism, that I just think this isn't going to happen in my lifetime. So why don't I create an intersectional queer separatist space in which I can hear amen/a them retweet, where it's a space that is wrapped up in care. It's still about progression, but is in a way that we don't have to deal with this normalcy, this sense of, you know, like you were saying, like those people are full of, I think, what, you know, academics like to call now as privilege. They're full of this like sense that they are the mean, they are the central, they are the average, and therefore this means they decide, as you were saying. And what this government is doing, particularly with conversion therapy and what we saw with Brexit and border building, is going, we will ask those in the mean what they think. And it's just so dangerous, because it means people like us, you know, like 140,000 people died because of austerity. We've seen like over like 130,000 people have died because of the mismanagement of this government with just this crisis. So we're already looking at 500,000 people who we know are disproportionately elders, those with additional needs, or those who grew up or exist in poor households. That's not the mean, that's not the average, but that average is still deciding. And so I guess to bring it back to the local, I'm like, I just want to sit in a room with fat queer weirdos who will like we can rebuild and rethink the future with each other.
It's so I suppose the reason why I'm shaking my head or nodding or kind of yes-anding is because I don't think people have fully, and I don't know that they will, fully engage with how things started changing from 2015, 2016, arriving at the referendum results. Listen, we can all absolutely leave Europe. The problem is the truth of engaging with why that campaign was successful and what they centered as the reason and campaign promises that led to the win. And that has completely changed a lot of the discourse, and is a bit like Pandora's out the box now, the genie's out the bottle, and you literally can't put it back in. We keep on having like ridiculous conversations where we just can't and won't go back. It feels like it's affected everything. Before, where there was a sense of accountability, now there's a sense of full gaslighting and then doubling down. Like, sometimes I'm like, did you?
Yeah.
They just played you a video that had nurses wearing bin bags, cut back to you, and you said they had PPE. The video was 30 seconds before you spoke. And somehow, I watched a video of someone being asked why he voted the way he voted in Hartlepool. And this is the function of the doubling down and controlling information, means that he blamed Labour for their loss of hospitals, less police, and so we voted for a difference, but a Conservative, with the conversation between local and central government completely out of the picture, and understanding that who he just voted for have actually been in power for 10 years. So it's very, and I think it might feel like this is tangential, but actually the function for people who are marginalized, it is incredibly nuanced and part of this conversation. Because, for instance, how this immediately affected my life was when it was announced that I got some funding. not just the press honed in on my size, my sexuality, my race, my dual heritage. That's what the press did, from the Daily Mail to Nick Ferrari and LBC. And that translated as daily racist, homophobic insults on my page. It's kind of gone down a little bit, but it's still there. And that is what this functions as. You kind of go, well, this is a satellite conversation, it's tangential. Actually, no, it isn't, because it legitimizes someone thinking they've given me or you permission. And I'm like,
for real. It's, I think that'll be like an interesting thing to sort of just maybe uncover a little bit, if we can do it in a safe way, which is, I think on the face of it, people see us as these kind of like brave artists, these brave performers who reclaim space and hold space for other people. And something which I'm really interested in about is like kind of unveiling more of that stuff, where it's actually like the compromises that we have to make because of that. You know, both you and I have been the subjects of very strategic right-wing attacks. You know, like I get stopped quite a lot in the street because there is a video of me made by a right-wing group that essentially ridicules me, and they've put loads of CGI into it. So they've done a lot of effort into it. But this is it's got like 2 million hits on YouTube. And you know, that's just, yeah, and that's just pure ridicule of me. Someone's like really gone for it. And of course you have like had press intrusion, telephone numbers, addresses, that sort of stuff leaked as well. Like there is a cost to us being what I guess some people would call, you know, activist artists, or artists taking on the public realm, right?
One of the, I mean, you will know, you know this intimately, but without kind of completely digging into the wound, there was a scenario where I called you to talk about a particular thing, whether I should take that thing on. And that was literally about mitigating risk. Because, for instance, when all that stuff was published last year, somebody was insulting me on Instagram. I blocked them, and then within 5 minutes, they'd made an account on Twitter that posted my address. And the interesting thing about what you just said here, in terms of articulating what we do, is the cost of understanding that we are never, from all sides, left and right, we're never allowed, or we're seldom allowed to be human beings. We're always humans doing, and it's so exhausting. That in the last 18 months, I've done one project, well, 2 projects. One was the weirdest commission from, actually 3 projects, was from Hull, about reading stories to kids. Listen, before I sat down to read it, it was like a chore, just because pandemic. And then it was just heaven, because I just kept putting the children in my mind, like, okay, this is for you. And the responses from parents, from kids, incredible. Like, such a blessing that I didn't know until somebody went, look at you going into people's children's lives without their parents' permission. You're vile. Should be, you know, that if this was a different time, you wouldn't be here. Okay, sure. Okay, thank you. Then the Royal Court, I did a project with the Royal Court, and just to take us back to what you were saying about going into buildings and wanting part of your personality and having to, I went to the Royal Court thinking, okay, this is what I'm going to offer. And when I arrived, the Royal Court was screaming in my face, going, take your shield off. Put that shit, no, we want everything. We want, shut up, take it off. This is not that building. This is not that space. So for the first 2 hours, I was like, and I imagine if you ask the other cast, because I only joined them for the last 2 days, they would be like, maybe I was standoffish, or because I was literally trying to catch up with what the building was telling me. It was a building that was operating like, diversity isn't a buzzword, it's just who we are. We literally just look like the underground carriage from Victoria that brought you here. And I was like, oh my God, I don't have to perform. Which was so, it's so weird that was weird to me. It was so weird that was that was a room filled with a black guy, a working class northerner, a Chinese, an Indian girl. The director was like, hold on a minute, this is going to be like, we're on candid camera. The cost. I don't really have any specific examples about when I've just done something. I don't know that I have, without being a black this or a gay that or a drag this, or that's a really sort of really incisive. It's not that we don't know. I think is when you articulate it the way that you've articulated it, it means that we have to articulate what we think about it and say it out loud, and saying it out loud, knowing that we've held those experiences, just engages with the fact that it's difficult and exhausting.
And that sort of feels like a good segue, because there's a question here which says, this is from somebody who is attending, which says, if you could make one change to the way the creative and cultural sector works that would have made your journey better, what would it be?
To be honest with you, I think to be brutally honest is to understand that there is no handbook. There is no definitive guide, which is what I said about making mistakes. And what it means is that the mistakes that we make are the costs for understanding how best to build a practice. Because we don't know what to turn to. We just go, we're going to give it a go. And sometimes it burns some of us out of the industry. Sometimes it's injurious enough to cause adverse mental health because you're carrying all of this. But the truth is, because there is no, I'm going to turn to the guide on queer identity in inner spaces, it means that we just make it up. And all we can hope for is that the building or the invitation have and has allies who are listening to understand, not respond. Because people have a whole set of, this is how we do things. But if the invitation is genuine, for now, because we're still building it, I think it's just about hoping that the building is genuine in their invitation. Because, I mean, what do you think? How would you change the practice so that your work sat better, or you felt supported, or all those questions, you know?
I think there's two things. I think there's one that I want to acknowledge, which is that we are products of the initiatives and activisms of our elders that have gone before us.
Absolutely.
And we are also passing that on with things like the Working Class Arts Group and Little Cocoa Ensemble, because we have inherited some space and we want to share some space. And so I think that sense of like respecting what has came but playing it forward at the same time, I think is an integral part of what we do, and something which I really see as part of the work that you do with Ducky and your children's work, which is like, I'm laying the seeds here so that like Black queer drag queens like me, when they appear in these children's lives, they're just going to be like, oh, seen it. Seen it before, duh. Which is so beautiful, isn't it? Because actually what we're trying to get to is complete autonomy, where it's like, we are not actually at all interesting.
No. I mean, imagine that world. Imagine that world where reading, just reading a book in drag isn't a thing. It's just like, oh yeah, okay, that's who's coming to my school next week.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I'd really love to encourage past me but also within that, in that elder stuff, I really, I hate to say that you're my elder, chocolate cake, but you're just a few years older. But the encouragement that I got from seeing you do those things and then be like, pave the way for all of those Australian festivals, that then made me going into those Australian festivals,
oh my God,
a slightly easier sell.
Daniel You know,
Yeah.
yeah, all those connections. Yeah.
You know, like for context, room, like a producer who was working with and alongside and saw George, then started to see how this work had an audience and then took me on, you know, like that is playing it forward, Han, and you played it forward. So, and in a very difficult context of Australia.
Oh, listen, I don't think we've got enough town to break that down. We haven't got, no. Australia, we haven't got
Australia, full stop.
Yeah.
But I think something which I'd encourage myself from the past to inhabit more is audacity. Which just when I found that voice of audacity, I was able to kick the door in. I just didn't care anymore. I was like, give me a beep commission.
Do you know why that is so important, gifting yourself audacity? Because I'll tell you something for free. Joe Blogg and Sam Smith and Jenny Smith have the audacity to question you. There is no... I got a message at, I will not forget the time. It was 5:17 a.m. So he was either coming back from work or going to work. And the whole picture just presented itself to me. I was like, okay, so brushed his teeth, flipped on the kettle, and then was like, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll find a black drag queen to insult online. And you go, you just have your dad, it's intrinsic that you've been gifted this sense of privilege and audacity to just go, I'm going to say that because, yeah. So giving yourself that permission is I think it's a constant part of our evolution, because like them who think that they have the license to do that, we have had the space of going, the grateful, thank you for the license. So I think that audacity is an important part of the work that doesn't come overnight. It's something, because you have to unlearn the gratitude or find the people to be grateful to, not just like whatever James on the train, but actual people who have made this possible. I just want to keep on giving everyone funny names. James, Jenny Smith, Joe Blogg. Who are all these people? Who are these?
But I love because it's such good shorthand.
Bernard.
I was wondering, because it feels like this is a really interesting question, which is really short and direct, but I'd be really interested to hear your answer to this.
Here we go.
Which is, how do I directly, is the word, how do I directly start in theatre? I have an answer. Well, I've got two. My first answer is, don't run, get out. Don't do it to yourself. It's stupid.
What's the second answer? What's the second answer?
The second answer is do what we did, which is like create your own spaces, create your own gang, find the other weirdos, make them your peers, learn from each other, share resources, call each other up when you both feel compromised. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that to be a dialogue that goes on forever, because if you're going to seek any form of confirmation from an institution, then you're going to be waiting a long time.
Yes, and my offer to support my yes and to that is really interrogate what it is that you want to say, because I think finding that will help you understand where you want to say it, how you want to say it. Yes, what is it that you want to say? What is the conversation you want to have? I think that gives you a lot of direction and offers a lot of insight into, because I think if you do that, it releases you from the picture of theatre being a building or a place, when it's literally, it can be any and everywhere. But I think once you find your voice, you'll understand where you want to sit. And that's not to say just pick up a box and go and stand in Covent Garden. That's to say understand context, give yourself some context, you know?
Yeah, you and I have done theatre for people eating overpriced dinners in West London, for people who are drunk off their nut at festivals in Perth, when me and you have done, like we've been on joint bills in like, lots of different contexts and spaces, got changed in accessible toilets together. Like what you say, like really echo, like it can theatre and performance and drag and showing off, all of these words that we use quite flippantly, it is that thing of just like, create your own space, carve out your own little bit, and it doesn't have to have a proscenium arch. Yeah,
this is precisely it, because I know that getting ready in what was the Audio's disabled toilet, which was used as a store, 3 of us, me, Dollar Rocket and Boogaloo Stew, there with makeup. Listen, before the age of contour and people on Instagram, I had 1 tube of cerise lipstick from Princess Knickers. I'll never forget, it was a gold tube. We were on at 12:30. At 12:20, like, Gateau, we're on. I'm like, yeah, give me a minute. Lips, blusher, eyeshadow. The 1 lipstick was my entire makeup, and I did that for 1-2 years. And I think the drag born out of anarchy and necessity, going, I'm not trying to be a woman, I'm not trying to be perfect. I suppose the really interesting thing is how we've lost spaces to play and experiment. I think there are less and less and less of those, because downstairs at Bistro Tech, Booby Tuesday doing, what was the series? Under Construction.
Yeah.
Those sort of things where you actually go, we celebrate these mistakes in front of an audience, and they get doing musicals and people going, yeah, I don't want that one. I'm like, girl, I agree, the sound is shit. That sort of, rapport, I think we're losing those spaces, which is why I would encourage what you said in finding a tribe that help you find the audacity to go, this is how I want to say it.
No, I think it would be really easy to sort of end on like, what are you doing next, Gateau? But I guess, because that question might come anyway, but I guess I'm more interested in the feeling. So what are you feeling you might feel next artistically?
Well, there are a couple of things happening this year already. I'm starting with Emma Rice on a for the Old Vic.
But you just dropped a name next week.
Emma Rice for the Old Vic.
Just dropped a name.
Clang. Emma Rice for the which I'm sort of looking forward to, but also incredibly terrified by, just because we have been anti-human now for 12, 15, like getting on a train to go to London was a whole thing. So the reason I bring that up is because we're going to be in a room with different, so it's a lot, but also without kind of marking what we've all collectively been through, because if we are honest in understanding this pandemic, is the first time the entire planet has gone through the same thing at the exact same time. I know you have World War I and World War II. However, those were in specific locations. So you knew, but this is something happening everywhere now. And I think it is the function of art to somehow collect this at some point. I'm not saying go on stage and weep. I'm saying that we are the mirrors. We are the distillation of our souls. Not even in a lofty way, just to kind of go, I know people who've attended burials via Zoom in this 15 months. So how do I go in the most human way? So next is to, as opposed to pushing a button and going, we're ready, next is to let all of this simmer and cook, so that because when it was approaching the idea that we're all going to be open by June 12th, the emails literally kind of thinking that we're some kind of tap, but we've gone through the exact same thing that you have, and some of us even more still. One of those people that I attended a Zoom was me, my brother-in-law, but I also went to my friend's mother's funeral, and it's just like, we just need to exhale so that we can understand who we are now, because that has changed. What do audiences want? So I suppose that question to you as well, in the context of all the things that we've talked about and how you want to pivot into creating spaces that allow those people who don't quite have the audacity yet to exhale, what is your next vision? And it doesn't even have to be this year. I just mean, this is like, what would you like to be the distillation of that conversation?
Yeah, well, I echo what you say about it's the dust has got to settle for me, right? Because the 3 works that we have got ready, well, a couple are ready to go and one that's in development. One's about queer trauma. One is about is a fat dance project, gathering fat audiences, and the other is about class trauma. Now, if I put that class trauma to a stage of it's a show for middle class people, they are not going to be listening right now because they're going to be like, we haven't had our holiday in Provence for the last 2 years, so we've gone through it too. So that dust has got to settle for them to be able to hear what I need them to hear about where we're at socially in this country with the class system. Also as well, like fat people have been told, like, you're gonna die, but they're no sooner getting the vaccine than anybody else. So the ethics of gathering people as well has also got to come into my consciousness and our consciousness with that work. So what I'm feeling like I've just got to wait it out a bit. Because like you say, there is this mad panic. People are like, culture, culture, go, go, culture. And I'm just a bit like, actually, I think people need to learn how to be in a room with each other first.
Yeah.
Because people are like, I mean, I notice it as well, you know, people are becoming, you know, in public space a bit closer. And I'm like, oh, how do I feel about that?
Listen, my friend told me the funniest story because he was a resident director on a West End musical, and as we kept going and not quite fully deciding if we're going to close or not, there was a scene where the reality of COVID had reached theatres, but the West End hadn't closed, and there's a scene where kids blow balloons and they let the balloons out, and this happened. Like literally, what was a moment of joy was like proper screeching terror, because we have already, this was last March, we had already changed. So what is it going to be like sitting in a room full of 200 people and one person coughing? Whereas before, the collective experience of laughing at something together or holding your chest at something amazing, we need to relearn all of that. What is that going to be? So yeah, I think that is such an important thing. Like, I know you think that we're out, but I'm still wearing my mask and you're still 3 fridges too close to me. I need you at 5 fridges. Do you remember that? Do you remember that? 3 fridges away. They needed you to be 3. The government made up measurement that was 3 fridges away. Okay, sure.
What a way to fat shame us.
Yeah, so thank you, sir. That is 3 fridges. I'm talking about an under cabinet fridge, not a Liebherr, not the American one. Okay, there you go.
We're not talking Smeg fridge.
We're not talking Smeg fridge. We're talking Argos fridge, the slim line. Not, well, I mean, that line. Argos under cabinet fridge. I don't know.
Well, this has been the worst. I've hated it.
Every syllable. Oh Lord, what we like. Hi Esther, you're back.
Hello.
Hi.
I put back to do thank yous, which is to you, Gateau, and Scottee, and to Becky for doing our interpreting this afternoon.
Thank you, Becky.
That's Gateau's sign name, by the way, that he keeps demonstrating.
Yeah. Can I just say also, though, it was so funny because Scottee and I were like, oh, we've got an hour to... You literally have to come on and stop us because we'll keep going. So no, thank you so much for inviting us. I think it's also such a wonderful reminder because we forget that we have a shared history. So what you facilitate is us going, oh my God, we haven't done this unpacking for such a long time. So it's so easy to fill an hour, and I'm glad that you did. So thank you, Esther and Towner Eastbourne, for facilitating this, because you know, in a weird sort of way, like I feel like we are every now and then we just need to plug into each other just to recharge. And that's what these things allow us to do. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think it's really, it's such a strange time, which is like, I'm just picking up on the point where you were leaving off. I feel like we have lots of new ways of communicating, and some people I talk to much more often now because I do it through a laptop than I would do in person. And at the same time, they are actually quite nuanced, and you communicate in a different way through each one. So yeah, it's all still quite a lot of strangeness to deal with.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
But thank you both of you for creating such a welcoming and joyful, and actually I found it quite poignant space to be in as well. So thanks for sharing with us.
Don't be so surprised, Esther. Very poignant people.
Just falling into one of your cliches, Scottee.
Oh, she's so gobby, that one. So...
I am, thank you. It's the audacity that I've reclaimed from my class background.
The audacity, that's why.
Yeah, you did it. So yeah, I was just going to say thank you to everyone attending this afternoon, and we will be putting up the recordings of each of this series. So there's actually 8 talks now in the series, and this is the last one, which is fantastic. So thank you again for that. They will go up onto the Town at Eastbourne website shortly, and also people attending will be sending a short survey through Eventbrite. And just also to say, I know we've talked quite a lot about the building throughout your talk, and in a slightly different sense, I hope, I just wanted to remind everyone that we are open to the public again from next week on the 18th of May. So we're really excited about welcoming people back. So it'll be really nice to get used to seeing people face to face again.
Oh, I know, in a theatre space, incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you again, and I hope to see you in real life.
Yes,
soon.
absolutely. Take care.
Thank you.
So much.
Bye.